Okay, here's assessment 1 again. So we've gone through the actual or perceived role. Now let's have a look at the next two sections. Identify the legislative requirements and codes of practice that directly impact on your teaching. And identify the legislative requirements and codes of practice that directly impact on your learning environment. So we're going to look at the legislative requirements and codes of practice. The aim of this session is to discuss and learn about legislative requirements and codes of practice applicable to our teaching role. And learning outcomes. Upon completion of this session, learners will be able to identify the legislative requirements and codes of practice that directly impact on your teaching, identify the legislative requirements and codes of practice that directly impact on your learning environment. Acts and regulations you must be aware of and comply with, because they're the law. They will have a direct impact on your teaching and the learning environment. Education establishments, that's anywhere where training takes place, must adhere to current legislative requirements of the law. Examples include Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974, the Equality Act 2010, the Data Protection Act 1998, the Human Rights Act 1998, the Freedom of Information Act 2000. Legislative requirements and codes of practice. Now, any of these requirements, any of these codes of practice or laws that apply, you must summarize the key aspects of those that apply to your particular learning environment. So, some more that I put down, we've got Apprenticeship Skills Children and Learning Act 2009, Awarding Organisation Guidelines, Children Act 2004, Every Child Matters, Copyright Designs and Patents Act 1988, Criminal Records Bureau Clearance, CRB check, Data Protection Act 1998, amended 2003, Disability Discrimination Act 1995, amended 2005, Education and Skills Act 2008, and Equality Act 2010. Also, this is already mentioned, just go through that again, Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, including the relevant regulations under the Act, for example COSH, PPE and DSE. Inspection requirements, Ofsted, etc. Organisational guidelines, for example dress and timekeeping. Organisational policies and procedures, for example appeals. Complaints, risk assessments. Professional codes of conduct. Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act 2006. Further Education Teachers Qualifications, England Regs 2007. Regulations are very complex and written in a specific way that in many instances make it difficult to determine whether or not you're complying with the requirements within them. They are, in essence, two types of codes of practice, which are as follows: the approved codes of practice and best practice. And the codes of practice actually define the regulations in more depth. They make them more understandable. The codes of practice are put together by people in the industry, for people in the industry. So to summarise, legislative requirements include both acts and regulations under the acts that you as teachers need to be aware of and comply with. Educational establishments, that's anywhere where training takes place, must adhere to current legislative requirements, i.e. the law. So revision, a question. Which of the following is not a legislative requirement? Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, Data Protection Act 1998, Human Rights Act 1998, HABC Code of Practice. Is it A, B, C or D, which is not a legislative requirement? And the answer is D.